Welcome back to Hospitality Talks, where industry leaders come together to share ideas, challenge conventions, and inspire what's next. I'm your host, Abid Bhatt. Today's guest is one of the most powerful strategic minds in global hospitality. Based in Paris, Gilda Perez-Alvarado serves as the Group Chief Strategy Officer for Accor, while simultaneously leading the legendary ultra-luxury brand Orient Express as its CEO. Before taking the helm at Accor and steering Orient Express's iconic hotels, trains, and yachts, Hilda spent nearly 2 decades reshaping hospitality real estate as the global CEO of JLL Hotels and Hospitality. She is a Cornell trustee, a board member for Blackstone Mortgage Trust, and a true titan of industry strategy. Hilda, thanks for taking the time to join us. I know you keep a very, very, very busy calendar, but thanks for joining Hospitality Talks today.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
So we'll dive right in, Hilda. Could you share a little bit about your personal journey? You have had a stellar career traveling around the world. Share a bit about your background, what attracted you to this industry, and more importantly, what has kept you in this industry?
I would say so. That's a long-winded question, Abid, with a long-winded answer. What I consider myself to be a global citizen. I was born in Costa Rica to a Salvadorian father, and my mom was born in San Francisco to a Nicaraguan mother, and her father is half Costa Rican, half French. So I am the mix of many great nations, I would say, very friendly, loving nations. And, when I was a young girl, we lived in Costa Rica. We also moved to North Africa. We lived in Europe. And at the age of 13, I moved to the Midwest of the United States. Then I went to school, university at Cornell. And when I graduated, I started also a very international career, first doing consulting. I was based in Miami, and then I joined Brokerage for almost 2 decades. And I was very lucky working in Miami, in New York, in London, in Madrid, back in New York. And just recently, I decided to take a post in Paris. And so I married a foreigner. My husband's from Spain. My sister married a foreigner. My brother married a foreigner. So we're the United Nations. And there isn't a more global industry than travel and tourism and hospitality. So what keeps me there is this alignment of a global vision, this never-ending quest or insatiable appetite to see the world, to meet as many people, and to discover and be delighted. So we're very lucky we work in the best industry in the world. And, and the more you do this, the more you realize the world is very, very small.
I'm sure this question gets asked of you all the time, having lived and visited all these places around the world. Any favorites?
Home, wherever that is, by the way, wherever that is. So, I am extremely close to my family, and wherever they are, I feel at home. But I can be in New York City, I feel like I'm at home. I can be in Miami, I feel like I'm at home. I'm in Madrid today, actually, I feel like I'm at home. I'll do the same in London. I'll do the same in Paris. And because my career has been global and my time at Cornell, my best friends were from all over the world. I always have somebody I can call in the city that I'm in. During my previous post at JLL, I left when I was global CEO of the Hotels and Hospitality Group, and we had 32 offices around the world, a very big team. And so I was going around the world literally 3-4 times a year. So I can always find a friend basically, or if not, a friend or of a friend.
Well, Hilda, you are possibly the quintessential travel and tourism and hospitality person, not only from all the ethnicities that you're involved in personally within your family, but also traveling all around the world. That I'm sure you can relate to, no matter where you land, and all of a sudden you feel at home. That's a very unique attribute and unique quality that not too many people can relate to, because travel does create an anxiety. What
Yes, for some people it does create an anxiety. You're so right. But you know what? For me, I would say my parents instilled this global citizenship because they themselves as well also lived everywhere around the globe. When you're moving all the time, one, it makes you very adaptable, but two, it also creates a very strong sense of self. So what you see is what you get, Abid. I am Hilda here in China, in Egypt, in France, or in Costa Rica. You get the same Hilda, and it's nice. It makes you feel very much at peace.
So true. Our son has grown up traveling with us all around the world, and honestly, his view of the world is like a tiny little village. He has friends
Yes.
from all over the world, and it's really refreshing to see him put his lens on how he considers the world moving forward. Well, look, we will continue on with your legendary career, not only at JLL and now at Accor. How has the transition been dealing with multi-million dollar asset transactions, hardcore negotiations, to lot of emotions involved in brand side of it?
It's been beyond interesting. One of the things that I like to say when people ask me, what made you take such a drastic decision and how did you feel? The reality is I wanted to learn. I was speaking with a friend of mine earlier today, and we both came to the conclusion that comfortable makes us uncomfortable. You just need to keep on growing and going and discovering. We're all very different people, but that's definitely what drives me. I had, I would say, the most privileged of careers at JLL. I grew up at JLL. I was there for 19 years. And I went from analyst to global CEO, working in multiple offices and brokering some of the most beautiful pieces of hospitality real estate around the world. And, the beauty about doing that and also running our cross-border investment sales team is you get to connect people, you get to bridge cultures. And we, as a broker and real estate investment advisor, it's almost like you're sitting in the control tower of an airport and you know exactly who's landing, who's taking off, who's out of commission, who's partnering with somebody else, who's changing strategies. You have, I would say, probably the most perfect view you can get of the hospitality real estate investment market. And you get to deal with everything from sovereign wealth funds to the operators, to the lenders, to the equity investors. You have the whole spectrum. I got to meet, obviously, the hotel brands and the CEO of the hotel brands very, very well. And I was very enamored as to what Accor had been doing in the last decade in terms of a tremendous amount of transformation from a historically premium mid-scale economy operator to one that was growing very quickly in the lifestyle division and in the luxury division, and had acquired very prominent centennial brands, right? So the centennial brand of Asia with Raffles, the centennial brand of Europe with Orient Express, the one of North America, Fairmont, and so on and so forth. I mean, there are brands that we have at Accor that go back to the 17th century and is just absolutely brilliant. So I was very interested on that. I was very interested in learning about how a global hotel management company like Accor works from that European viewpoint to the world. And so it was by the way, it was a very long discussion. It took 6 years. And there was a point in early 2023 where I was ready and I ran into Sebastian Bazan at an event in Saudi Arabia. And he asked me, so when are we going to do something? I said, you know what? I think I'm ready now. Let's do it now. And I think I caught him by surprise. But lo and behold, come October 1st, I was working in Paris. And you know what? It took a lot of strength, a lot of belief in myself. You know what I told you, that having that very strong sense of self, because whilst I stayed in the travel and tourism and hospitality industry, I did a complete 180. It's came to a new country, was new language, new part of the business. I didn't really know anybody in the team. I knew the chairman and CEO, but that was it. And when I make a bet, we do it as a family. My family is my team. And so my husband and my 3-year-old daughter, she was 3 years old at the time, we all moved and we didn't look back. We're all gonna go do this and we're just gonna get it done. And so it's a very humbling thing to go from a career where you pretty much master it. You knew when a transaction would come in, you knew exactly the steps you had to take. You would put in the investor list. You knew the phone calls. You had just seen the people. By the way, I studied at Cornell with a lot of our peers, so it's a very familiar, very comfortable setting. This was completely and truly foreign. So my two guiding principles in life is, one, I obviously want my family to be doing well, and whatever decision we make has to be 1 + 1 = 3 or more. And the other one is, I always have to be learning. And when I was adapting to this new setting, new environment, new way of doing business, new career, new role, I had to keep very much in mind those two things. One, I moved my family halfway around the world. I can't fail. And two, I wanted to learn, and this is how you learn. You got to walk. You got to get it done. It was the biggest blessing and the biggest surprise that a few weeks after I joined as chief strategy officer of the group, I was asked to step in as CEO of Orient Express. And, that was at the time a totally new venture for Accor in several senses. One, it's the ultra luxury space. Two, it is a very, very important heritage brand. Three, we were going to reintroduce the brand to the market, not just with hotels, but with trains and yachts. And these are areas of expertise that we needed to develop, let alone, the infrastructure, the systems, connecting it, developing the client database. All of this was very, very difficult. So that has been my last 2.5 years, almost 3 years. And it's been, I would say, the most hyper concentrated time period of my life in terms of growth and intellectual stimulus. And I am extremely proud of everything that we did collectively as a team. And, sometimes we as women are taught to be very humble and shy, but I can tell you I'm so proud of myself for having done this. And I hope that one day it's a good role model for my daughter, that there's no challenge too big. Just need to do it. So we're in the process now of transferring the presidency of Orient Express to our partner, which is LVMH. I feel extremely privileged to have also had a seat alongside them. And so I got way more than I could have asked for and dreamed for. And it's been just an extraordinary experience.
Amazing, amazing. Look, your career trajectory is fabulous. You are, and I know you are a very humble person, but you are one of the most prominent executives, female executives in the hospitality world.
Thank
Thinking
you.
back in your younger years of when
Mhm.
you were starting out in this industry, talk a little bit about an uncomfortable career decision that you might have made that set you up for success.
I don't know that it's been uncomfortable, Abid. It's just, the principle has always been say yes. And when we developed this cross-border investment sales team, it was almost serendipitous. We basically, as I said to you, I grew up at JLL. When I started there, I was 23. I left when I was 43. And I grew up with basically a lot of my friends in the industry, and we wanted to find an excuse to work together around the world. So we created the global desk, which you're very familiar with, because we've had many meetings over the last, 2 decades together.
Yeah.
Sometimes opposite side of the table, sometimes same side of the table. It's been really fun. One of my many managers and CEOs that I've had during my career, one of his sayings is half of life is showing up. You just got to show up. You got to say yes. You got to take on an opportunity. And every time I've taken that, I don't know if it's the adrenaline, but I find it extremely exciting and it makes me very happy. And I don't really go deep into investigating who it is exactly that I'm going to be meeting or what it is exactly that I'm going to be doing. I like things to evolve organically. You show up at dinners, you ask to go to meetings, you eventually find your way at the table, you find a seat at the table and you start learning and you start emulating and then before you know it you have enough this push or this frequency that you just go. You find your exact wavelength. And it is very, very uncomfortable sometimes at the beginning. Like I said, I mean, the switch going to Paris to do operations when, by the way, and I've said this to other friends in the past, there was one time I was having a lunch with a headhunting friend of mine, and he said, one of your weak points in your curriculum is that you have no operations experience. And I said, what do you mean? I went to hotel school. Yeah, my mom was a hotel manager. My grandmother owned a hotel. Of course, I know operations. Well, I think he was right. I didn't really know operations that deeply, but that stuck in me. And whenever people have said, no, you can't do it, you shouldn't do it, you don't know how to do it, that's very good fuel for me to then go and get it done. And so that stuck with me. And, here was the greatest opportunity for me to get my, roll up more sleeves and get my hands dirty in terms of working with a brand and let alone launching a brand of it. It was, sometimes they say, be careful what you dream of. I would say dream very big because you never know what you're going to get. And this has been fabulous.
Oh, that's amazing. Hilda, you have given away your secret. So if we want to get something done, we'll just tell you you're not going to do it.
But that's right. And then I'll go and I'll do it if I think it's a fun and great idea, by the way. There's a disclaimer there. But
So,
you know what? Just going back to that and, just a piece of advice or just a couple of things of advice that I learned in my almost 2 decades of working in brokerage. Brokerage, as you know, it's a very cutthroat job. It's hyper competitive. You got to work really hard. You're only as good as your last deal. There's KPIs everywhere. It's very commercial. It's financial at the end of the day. And when you're working global out of the US, the amount of trading that happens in, every day, every month is just the volumes are big. So you got to be on your game all the time. And there aren't many women in brokerage. It's probably very, very little women in brokerage. But I was extremely fortunate in that I had the best team in the world. And all the guys that I work with, I consider them all to be, great friends and also great teachers. And by the way, even in situations where I think maybe I could have done better, those are learning experiences of it. And you learn to compete, but you're not, I've never competed with other people. I always compete with me. I know what I can get. I will get upset with me if I know I didn't give it my all. And when you're working as, trading real estate or connecting people or brokerage financial services, you have this, daily competition going on. It's almost like an adrenaline rush you get all the time. And that thing of just never stopping, looking at patterns, how do you connect things, that has been for me one of the greatest bases I could have had to do any other job. So I'll be forever grateful for that time period. It set me up, I think, very well to do what I'm doing right now in terms of knowing the investors and the global audience and what they're looking for, and knowing all these markets and destinations as well from my prior job at PwC. You just can't stop learning. I think that's rule number one.
Very true. And I think to a lot of us, this industry provides new learnings every time we go
Hmm.
to a new geography, deal with a different person. Hilda, for the younger new entrants into this industry, as you know, the industry is at a bit of a crossroads because millennials and Gen Xers are not necessarily attracted to this industry. What advice would you have for people that might be looking at it from the outside, not quite decided whether this is the career they want to pursue?
Listen, there's so many angles to hospitality. I think there's everything for everyone in this beautiful industry. And I do consider travel and exploring to be the greatest form of diplomacy out there. You got to go and see things for yourself. You got to go and meet people for yourself. You got to go see how people around the world live and know that you cannot impose yourself, your values, your forms to the rest of the world because it just doesn't work like that, right? I think once you go and you travel and you discover that there's so many different dimensions, which by the way, it would take for us probably 1,000 lifetimes for us to see everything. And if I had one, one wish, superpower wish, I wish I could live many lifetimes because there's many things I would love to do. Um, I would say go out there, explore, learn about a city. There's so many great things happening in hospitality right now. At Over the last 2.5 years with Orient Express, we're seeing this confluence between travel, hospitality, arts, culture, fashion, sports. There's so many angles to it. It's absolutely brilliant. Who would have said to me 25, 30 years ago that I was going to be learning about luxury trains or how to do luxury sailing yachts or opening hotels that, in a palazzo that dates back 600 years? No one. It's absolutely incredible. I would say the greatest gift somebody can have is to be curious. And if you're curious, this is absolutely by far the best industry in the world. And by the way, you can be very financially driven, for which you have, there's the banking side, the brokerage side. You can go into operations, you can go into real estate development, anything. I mean, the industry is so vast, but it's so small and so well connected. And the people who work in the industry across all levels, they're, for the most part, I've only met people who are very kind.
Terrific. Hilda, one last question. Coming from investors' lens, if you were to
Hmm.
put that lens on, how do we quantify mathematically and strategically the financial value of heritage and
Hmm.
soul and
Such
the
a great and
emotional
pertinent
attachment?
question. Yeah, you know what? That's absolutely brilliant question, Abid. So one of the things that I was lucky to specialize in when I was at JLL with this global cross-border transactions is for the most part the assets that we were trading were trophies, as like like to call them trophy assets in the industry. And this is truly iconic, irreplaceable real estate. Tell me how you value something like the Creon in Paris or the Orient Express in Venice, or it doesn't matter, name it. How do you value this? You cannot find this piece of real estate anymore. There's so much history and heritage behind it. This is treasure, literally treasure. So whenever we would do a pitch, I think that's the best example, and we would have to provide a broker's opinion of value and then go and defend it in the market if once we agreed with the owner that this was the value we would guide to. At the end of the day, the market decides, but this is what we would guide to. There was always this economic part of the valuation, which obviously you'll get from cash flow and all that. But then there's this intrinsic value, which the biggest driver of this intrinsic value is called emotion. It's emotion. It's an emotional attachment. It's when you're buying a piece of art. I mean, Sotheby's or Christie's, when they're selling a masterpiece, they will have an intrinsic, an economic value that they'll put to it. But you cannot account for the person who will say, I absolutely have to have this because of XYZ reason. Sometimes it's because they want to. Sometimes it's because they maybe something very meaningful in their lifetime happened at that property. Or because something else happened, maybe not related to their lifetime, but of historical importance, or because there's literally art in there. And so our job was to find that needle in the haystack buyer who would value the asset at its highest value and would pay that premium above the market. If we were to be right now in real estate finance, how do you value a trophy property that dates back hundreds of years, that is losing money, and yet you manage to sell it for millions of dollars per room because it's just a piece of art? So what I loved about the job before and what I love about the new skill set I've acquired now is it's being able to find that investor, know how to appeal, how to do that emotional appeal. You need to be able, by the way, to cross cultures and cross communication barriers as well with some of these investors. And, you lived in the Gulf. Tell me how many beautiful trophy properties around the world are owned by Gulf investors or high net worth family offices from Asia, and they happen to be in other jurisdictions. The way you approach them, the way you talk to them is very, very different depending on where you are. So you have to have that financial sense, that almost private banking sense with discretion and care. You have to have a good sense of diplomacy as to what is culturally and acceptable or not. And you better know the asset that you're selling inside out and be able to sell the dream, right, as to what this property could be. So we're at an amazing time where more and more travelers, if you look at where the industry is today, there's a very clear K-shaped recovery, right? The commodity assets are being priced down. Performance for a good number of them is going down. But you look at these assets that are playing in that ultra luxury level, they are embedding or incorporating culture and lifestyle, and they're being very relevant. It's almost like there's insatiable appetite for that, and they will forever preserve their value. That's why, when we were selling assets like, I don't know, the St. Regis in New York or the Ritz in London, these are wealth preservation assets. And it's a very different conversation when you're speaking across the table with a private individual who's looking to acquire something to keep in the family for generations to come versus maybe a private equity group that is looking for a 3 to 5 year hold period where they can fix buy sell, to a sovereign wealth fund that maybe there's a political reason as to why they're doing a transaction. So you have to know your audience. You have to be able to observe. You got to read that body language. And you just got to know your stuff very well, which is why we go back to the theme of this conversation today. You better travel and you better understand how the world works.
Well, look, cultural nuances, you brought it up and spot on, not only from these multi-million dollar transactions point of view, but just being able to deal with a guest across the front desk
Oh,
or
yeah,
serving them
absolutely.
a cup of coffee. How do we train? How do we impart that in our team members that those cultural nuances are critical to make people feel great about themselves and create
Mm-hmm.
those unique moments.
Uh, listen, it's so pertinent. You just have to care at the end of the day, care to make sure like when you're there, you're present, right? If let's say I was your guest at your hotel and you cannot be bringing all your problems to the equation of it, right? You got to perform, you got to be taking care of me and me taking care of you if you're our guest. So we have to, in hospitality, create this um, perfect environment where the guest is at the center of it, and it doesn't mean be at the center of it at all costs. No, we there's got to be respect, there's got to be duty of care, and I think hospitality, we're losing a little bit of this duty of care. um I was having a conversation about conferences in general, and somebody was telling me that the latest it was the first time, by the way, I skipped one of the conferences this year in the US, which I never knew do, and you know me. I was preparing something else in Paris at the time, but they were telling me that less and less people want to go to these conferences because they become so transactional. There was a guest who was checking into a hospitality conference or registering, and the first thing out of the person who was doing the registration was, if you lose the batch, you got to pay X. What happened to welcome to the conference? Where are you visiting us
Yeah,
from?
yeah.
We hope, like just that duty of care. It was just a machine and it was careless. And, you know, I think we there's a very big misconception about the hospitality industry and what really service means. And service doesn't mean servant, I'm serving you. It means I'm taking care of you. That is what hospitality is all about. When you are hosting somebody in your home, you're taking care of them. When you're feeding somebody in your house, you're taking care of them. This is what hospitality is all about, showing them that you care, keeping it authentic. Commoditization is the killer of luxury. And by the way, luxury at the end of the day boils down to time, because that's the most precious resource you and I have.
And I think post pandemic era, people recognized during the pandemic that these worldly possessions might be great, having
Mhm.
whatever a 10th supercar might be amazing, but experiences are what is making them feel great about themselves. Hence the travel boom that has occurred. I think that,
Absolutely, absolutely. And listen, I don't want to get all philosophical or cheesy here, but at the end of the day, that's what life is. It's a collection of memories, right? It's fleeting moments that we have. So the
no doubt.
greater collection of memories you can have, the better. And that's what travel gives you.
It's also generational, though, Hilda. Don't you think that boomers were more into buying their house, and that was the ultimate dream, whereas the younger generation, they don't really care about owning a house. Yes, they'll have a house, but if they only have $1, they're not going to save that for buying a house. They would spend it on going to a great dinner or going for a trip.
I think, listen, I would say that's very locationally driven, right? I'm sure the baby boomer, um, well, and it's mostly a U.S. phenomenon, right? But like, let's say that age bracket, um, 70s plus minus, they, of course, they value deeply that sense of ownership because their parents, grew up in the Depression era and they didn't have anything. They didn't know, a lot of people didn't know even where they were gonna get their meal the next day, and so that sense of ownership was very, very important to them. I think, maybe what happened is we all got very lucky, and I'll talk about it from a US point of view. You know, my parents, for baby boomers, they gave us, my siblings and I, more than we could ever dream of. More. I mean, it was excessive, right? We had everything we wanted for Christmas, we got and more. We travel, education, and that was their way of showing care, right? And so then you take the X's and the millennials, And, how do you satisfy somebody who has it all? I don't know. There may be an element of exclusivity. And then you go now to the maybe next generation, and maybe they don't have as much wealth, but they want access to things. And so there's now this new business model that allows you to have access to things. I'll give you a great example, which caters to everybody. There's a fantastic club um, in Asia called Palm Mall, if I'm not mistaken, and it has one of the most beautiful selection of rare wines. And if you want to, you can buy the most insanely priced bottle for truly irreplaceable wine. I mean, then once it's done, it's done. Or they also can give you access to a glass. And by the way, that glass of wine might cost you in the hundreds, if not thousands, but you had access to it. Right. So they're targeting both, which I found to be really, really interesting. I'm putting in a lot of discussions that I have recently because I'm with people all day long. And so a couple days ago, I was with an amazing couple from Nepal, and they have a beautiful, beautiful hospitality business. I mean, beyond iconic and beyond irreplaceable. And we were talking about how is it possible that, a lot of these very wealthy, very rich and developed nations are so unhappy. And yet there's parts of the world that have not even a fraction of what they have. And yet they're so resilient and happy. I don't know. I think it has to do with your upbringing. And so I think it's very important to inculcate in children, and maybe, reteach ourselves that once we only get to do this one time, so it better be worth it. Two, the world is beautiful. Three, you have to go out there and meet people and understand and get context. Um, Four, not everything that you read is true. And, human beings, we're not meant to be alone or lonely. We're social animals. So it is important to go out there and get things done. So again, I don't want to be, putting people in, very hard categories, because if I believed in that, then I tell you, my career and my life wouldn't exist, because I'm an anomaly if I define myself by where I was born, the fact, a girl, this, that, the other. I've done things that I was not meant to do, but it's because I've never paid attention to that. If I don't like the rules, I tell people I rewrite my rules. So that's the
There you
motive.
go. And
Yeah.
and to your point, to be honest, a lot of that has to do with, I think, your upbringing. My
Mhm.
parents, with very, very limited, humble resources, they raised the family, and I know my dad used to say, "Hey, no matter what you do better than anybody else," and that has stuck with me throughout.
You know what? That's absolutely cultural. You go to Japan, it doesn't matter what trade people are on, there's such an element of pride. It has to be perfect.
Yep. Yep.
And it's almost ceremonial about it. I think that's very important. And it's also, one of the things that hospitality allows you to do is to rebuild that sense of community. You mentioned family. Family for me is the most important pillar. I'm from Latin America. Of course, we're very family driven, and la familia, and it's sacred. Um, but for those who maybe they come from a broken home, or there's other institutions that they can see. So families sometimes are very challenged. Religion used to play that role, but it's no longer the case as well. The Your job and your office used to play that role as well, but it's morphing because of uh, you know, uh, telecommuting or working from home and all that. But those going back to hospitality, those hospitality companies that are able to create this community, these tribes, for lack of a better word, I think they're going to be extremely successful. And that's one of the things that I learned in the last 2.5 years of Orient Express. Orient Express is built for people who are very curious and they want to connect. That's how the brand started back in 1883. And it's about creating these almost aesthetically shocking moments, and this reason to delight. So I do think all of us need to connect more, to have this sense of community and belonging. And the more we can do that, the better things will be, both for the industry and beyond.
Hilda, I'll stay here for hours on end talking to you about these things, but I know you're pressed for time, so I'm going to pivot a little bit towards luxury and luxury hospitality. The industry is using the term luxury, in my opinion, a bit too loosely, to be
Mhm.
honest. On one hand, we call it luxury, but on the other hand, we're looking for incredible growth in that. And I think the two are at odds with each other.
I agree with you. It's an
O-
oxymoron for sure.
It's definitely an oxymoron. On one hand, we're trying to democratize travel and experiences, but on the other hand, we want to wrap it in this luxury wrap. Help me understand from your lens, how do you define luxury, and what can the industry do to put guardrails around it so that people know what to expect?
Yeah. Listen, it's such a good question. I think there's very big misconception. It's like I like to say, a brand is not a color palette and a design book. That's not a brand. Okay, that's maybe a logo. Um, a brand is much more than that. And there's I think for something to be um, categorized as luxury or luxurious, it's not about putting in an expensive price tag. That is not it. You have to deliver what you're promising. At the end of the day, it's about this. It's exclusive. It's this sense of exclusivity, and I don't mean the exclusivity of you don't belong. No, no, you're coming with us. This is your time. We're gonna make you feel very special. There's an high degree of personalization. I got to know you. And by the way, know you enough before you arrive so that talking about this cultural nuance, I get that right. But also let things happen organically so that we can develop a long-term relationship in terms of brand and guest, right? There's elements of discovery that need to happen. We said the most precious resource we have is time. And honestly, that is what luxury is. The best things take time to do, to build. Um, the and again, I'm gonna answer everything through the Orient Express focus because that's been what I've been working on for the last several months. So we're working with artisans and craftsmen who know how to do this at the highest quality level. We're looking for the best materials, best ingredients, that duty of care, that depth that a heritage brand gives you. And at the end of the day, Abed, you got to do what's right for things in the long term. You got to take care of things, right? We have an immense duty and sense of responsibility when we know that we've been dealing with a brand that is more than 14 decades old. And what we do today needs to, ensure us that we can live for another 140 plus years. And it's about doing the right thing all the time for the sustainability of the business, right? And if all of our assets have been restored, they're treasures that have been restored. So our hotel in Rome, the Orient Express La Minerva, was built in the 1600s, and it is actually Rome's oldest running hotel. It became a hotel in the 1800s. And the restoration, renovation, transformation it went through took almost 3 years. And it's done impeccably. And the amount of research that was done, the hours of study research that went in there, I mean, they're in the thousands. The craftsmen that were brought over, that takes time to put together, and everything is custom made for that hotel, from the lamps to the fabrics to the furniture to the design. In Venice, this is a palazzo that was abandoned that dates back to the 1400s, and it's never been a hotel. And you can appreciate it's in Venice, it's on top of the water, it sits on water. Restoring something like that is almost an impossible, a Herculean feat. It took 8 years
Oh,
for
wow.
the investor to restore the property, and he did it hand in hand with the Italian government, because it's literally like when you're restoring art and treasure. And that was done under the care of an extraordinary artist as well. And everything there is custom made, from the chandeliers to to the side tables, everything. The trains that we have right now in Italy, La Dolce Vita, these were discarded trains of Trenitalia that date back to the 1960s and 70s. And La Dolce Vita celebrates that time period, right? It's mid-century, mid 20th century, post-war Italy. And it was about celebration and pleasure and art and culture and color. It was meant to be a happy time after such difficult time period. And so those trains were restored. And what's so interesting about this train restoration project is that most people who work on trains and yachts, that's an industrial process. So here we've had to marry industrial with artisanal process to get this done. So that's the Italian portfolio. There's another train that we're in the process of restoring right now. These are 1929 original Orient Express carriages that were abandoned in between the border of Belarus and Poland, and they are worse than relics. I mean, these things were corroded, discarded, and now they're being restored in across 3 sites in Italy, France, and Serbia. And they're going to be absolutely stunning, done to code of 1920s Art Deco on the yacht, which is new, and it's an engineering marvel of 2026 of our time. The exterior, obviously, is the latest technology, but the inside was crafts made, again, done to the Art Deco movement of the 1920s. So, and why we chose the 1920s is because that was one of the golden eras of travel. So it's that preservation, restoration, it takes time, it takes money, it's very capital intensive. And most of the people that are restoring these trophies, they have to have a very long time horizon. And these are mostly private investors who are keeping it for wealth preservation and for generations to come. So I would say that's just the product. The service has to complement and supplement the product. We have to have depth in terms of historical significance. And then the case of Orient Express, also literary significance, thanks to Agatha Christie and her 1934 novel. And, we also have to be looking forward, because the brand at its time, when it was launched in 1883, it was done by a 38-year-old Belgian entrepreneur in Paris. And it was again, it was an engineering marvel. It was state of the art. It connected people to places on the train from Paris to Constantinople back in the day. And it was done not just to perfection from an industrial point of view, but with the greatest care from an artistic point of view. It was very European. And so this is what we need to do as well. We also need to project forward, because, nostalgia is good, but not everything needs to be 100% nostalgic.
So, Hilda, in Europe, obviously there are lots and lots and lots of assets, history that goes for
Hmm.
hundreds of thousands of years, and all brands are emotive. But when you take a brand like Orient Express, that in itself has 140 years of history combined with assets that have history unto themselves.
Yes,
How do you bring that experience to the new world, if I may use that terminology? And also,
absolutely. Absolutely. We have to listen. Obviously, technology is here and has evolved. Technology was also there in the 19th century, but it's here and has evolved. Of course, we take advantage of having the best distribution and CRM systems, and we utilize AI as well. Uh, the way we market and acquire customers is also a very different playbook that is very important. Social media plays a very strong role. Word of mouth and referrals play a very strong role. The travel advisory community plays a very strong role as well. And, people obviously want to stay in these treasures, but they also want to be extremely comfortable and I want to make sure that things work. So, we keep a very balanced view, but also, a very authentic view. And, you know, there are obviously, many investors have come across who want to launch their new luxury brands, or a luxury product or not. And my answer to that is why not? October of 1883 had a day one. Day one can be now, and we just need to be doing the right thing in the long term. That's how you preserve these brands. And whilst Accor has several centennial brands, I mean, the best example as well lies within LVMH. They have 75 brands. They have incredible legacy brands. And, one of my moments of delight and discovery and this revelation is I went to go see one of their brands that we're partnering with on the wellness side on the yacht, Guerlain. And I was invited to go in the vault. And I had an incredible historian who showed me around, and I saw just, I mean, this is treasure, invaluable. Um, perfume bottles, makeup that was dating back to the Napoleonic times, just everything, archives. It was gorgeous. And then after I was done with the historian, you know who walked in? The research and innovation scientist walked in. And he was telling me about the latest technology that they're using. And we spent time talking about a specific line within Guerlain that is based on pollen and honey. And, we were having a conversation about climate change and where do you find this and where do you find the purest ingredients and the best ingredients. And this is how they're incorporating technology. And then I had a meeting subsequent to that with their marketing department. And oh my God, my mind was like blowing up. It was so incredible in terms of how effective and innovative and fresh it was. And here we are talking about, a heritage centennial brand. So there's it's the whole 360 approach. And I think that epitomizes for me what heritage brands need to do. There's the historical archive part of it, and that's your blueprint, by the way, of your non-negotiable fundamental principles of the brand. One, then you have that innovative aspect that you have to keep in mind, and then three, you got to know who your customer is and how to acquire it. And that's the same principle we apply to Orient Express.
Hilda, Accor has two distinctively different tracks with
Hmm.
the mid-scale economy and premium brands,
Yes.
and then the luxury and lifestyle collection that Accor has brought together. Most of the hotel companies, larger hotel companies, are being gauged through the net unit growth lens.
Yeah,
Everybody
that's
is
right.
after more, 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 more. How does the two work together? Um, yes,
It's you know what, Abid? It's a brilliant question, and it's the dichotomy. I at the end of the day, so this is how we're approaching it. You're absolutely right. When you're a publicly listed global hospitality company or a hospitality company, one of the KPIs that you got to report on a regular basis is net unit growth, NUG. And it's almost perverse, right? It's you're judged by it. And it can also deal to result in unintended consequences when you're signing the wrong deal or doing the wrong thing because you're being judged short term, right? We've been talking about long term and generational aspects in many facets of our conversation. And so you're very short term, short sighted. So maybe it works better, I would say, in the premium and scale economy side. It doesn't necessarily mean it will work, but it just, you can add more units It doesn't mean that you should, but you can add more units. On the luxury end of the spectrum, um, scarcity is really important. You can't commoditize this stuff. And the good thing is that the world is big and vast, and there are markets that are completely underserved, be it, from economy to all the way to ultra luxury. And so you have to find pockets of that. But just because you have a vacant plot, it doesn't mean that a hotel is the highest and best use. So, thank God for that background in real estate. I think that's very, very important. And there's so much right now, which is the other side of this net unit growth coin. There's the units that you're signing up, but there's also the units that you're losing every year because maybe the contract expired or it was time to part ways. But something that we're seeing across the world right now is that there's a lot of functional and physical obsolescence in some of these hotels, and they should not be there. So it doesn't matter, nug, no nug, it shouldn't be there. And so we obviously have that metric front and center, but we also have an addition to that metric, and it's fees per key. And and that will be driven by quality over quantity. And if you look at what Accor has done in terms of fee per key evolution over the past several years, it's a very positive story. And the more we can educate the analysts, in Wall Street or wherever, whatever stock exchange you trade in, the better. But it's a re-education of what's important. Volume is it doesn't always equate with long-term gains.
So, from your strategic uh, positioning for a core, if you were to look at the broader brand portfolio that you
Mhm,
look after from a bigger 30,000 feet uh, vantage point, what geographies are you more focused on versus the others? US for a core has been a bit of a challenge over the years. Very strong in Asia, very strong in Europe, of course, home being Paris. How are these markets being approached differently?
mhm, mhm. So I'll give you the stratospheric view. The Of course, Accor is extremely strong and competitive in South America, in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, and Asia Pacific, and the Pacific. But that, we need to be careful in terms of being complacent because it's very competitive as well. We have the rest of the global peers, especially American peers, that have done very well in terms of growing in those jurisdictions. Where we're not the largest is in the United States and China. Now, again, as I mentioned, largest doesn't mean the best, right? But I firmly believe that, the United States is a very, very strategic market for Accor, and we are very serious about it. We made very big investment in terms of being present. We established a flagship office in New York City now. And whilst we don't want to be in every market, and we shouldn't be in every market, we're focused on the global gateway cities where we know we can bring value and add value to the real estate investor. We need to make sure that if we're, of course, growing our brand portfolio, but we need to deliver results at the end of the day. I think a lot of hospitality companies forget that we're, in essence, investment managers. We're given the keys to a property, and now we need to make it generate bottom line so that the investor can do well in their investment and their bet on you. So where we can be very competitive as a group are in the major gateway markets where we can drive distribution. We've made a very big investment in our loyalty program, which is very important. That also drives distribution. And we've spent the last several years better defining our brands, right, and putting them in their respective swim lanes. Being able to articulate that to the investment community is very important. But we don't need nor do we want to be everywhere, and the time has come for us to be very selective and make sure that we're not just talking the talk, but also walking the walk. We got to deliver. And the beauty about a company like Accor is we have the hotel brands, but we also have our, our restaurant slash food and beverage business. We have our branded residential business. So we can, and we have real estate expertise. We can look at everything in a more holistic way and go back to that highest and best use and make sure that we're delivering.
Amazing. Hilda, last component, I know I've kept you a lot longer than I originally intended to, and thank you for sticking with me. Just some quick fire things,
Sure.
whatever comes to your mind first. From your personal point of view, a multi-million dollar transaction or that perfect hotel development, what gives you more adrenaline?
The transaction that combines, that has a very high emotional component, cross-border, luxury, irreplaceable real estate. That's what I love to traffic. I remember having many conversations, by the way, about the fact that maybe I could personally make more money selling, more hotels in the select service space, etc. And the fact is, I always chose to go for the more irreplaceable asset that would command global interest. That's what I specialize in. That's what I like to do. And so always that.
Okay. If all things considered equal between an amazing train or a yacht or accommodations in a palazzo, if you only had to select one, what would that be?
If I had to recommend one right now, I'd recommend the train. Just because not a lot of people have been on a train before like this one, and they should go and discover it. But the reality is, I'll recommend doing a loop and doing all three.
Okay. Okay. It sounds good. From a hotel and hospitality perspective, what's one most overused metric that you think needs to go away?
What we discussed, nug, get rid of that. Yeah. And
You
by the way, you got to understand, Abid, I come from Costa Rica. We're against mass tourism. We're against mass everything. And so I don't like mass nothing. So nug for me, bad.
Fair enough. Fair enough. From ultimate luxury and travel destinations, I think you have answered some of this already, but would you rather pick a key gateway or go to a secondary secluded market?
It's such a good question. How many times we talk about this at home in terms of where we want to go and discover. Um, I don't know. I'll give you a non-answer. I would say I love cosmopolitan. I love global cities very much, and especially those that have done a really good job in terms of their cultural preservation. So I want to probably go there because there's more activity and more noise, etc. But at the end of the day, you have no idea as well how many times I just think about, going back to this pura vida Costa Rican mindset and going in the middle of nowhere to, I don't know, some forest or some farm in Costa Rica and be away off the grid, secluded. So I would say both, but knowing me, I prefer more action. So I prefer a city.
Fair enough. We didn't get a chance to talk more in detail about the travel trends. We'll save that conversations next time. But if you were to look into the future, having done all that you have done in this industry, is there anything in particular that really concerns you that as an industry we need to be focused on?
Um, yeah, I think it goes back to that duty of care. Let's invest. Reinsert the care and hosting back into hospitality. And by the way, hosting is an art. It's an art, and we need to do that. Again, this is not. I think we really do need to change the way we communicate about it in terms of low skilled service industry. It's not true. We need to add dignity and humanity back into hospitality. And when you do things correct and right the first time, it will pay in the long term. That's how heritage is built.
Fantastic conversation, Hilda. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks to
Uh,
you, Abby. It was so good to see you.
Great seeing you. I look forward to having you back in not too distant future.
Thank you. Me too. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.